Hi everyone, welcome to this edition of the Broadcast where we give you bite-sized bits of best practices designed to help you be a better leader and a more effective communicator. I'm your host, Jarrett Breaux. Each week here on the Broadcast, we ask a discussion question online, collect the answers from your professional colleagues so you can look at your best practices and compare those to your colleagues. So here's our discussion question this week. The question is it ever appropriate to talk off the record to a reporter? Again, is it ever appropriate to talk off the record to a reporter? It's interesting because when I teach media training classes, I always get the question, can we talk off the record? So here are some of the answers from your colleague. Josh says, I firmly believe there is no such thing. Patrick says, rule number one, there is no such thing as off the record, and rule number two, see rule number one. Well said, Patrick. He goes on to say, one problem is that there's no clear definition of off the record. To one reporter, he says it can mean you just can't quote me, and to another person, it says that you can't use the information at all unless you get it confirmed from another source. He says, at best, you're putting yourself in the hands and you're trusting a reporter. And he goes on to say that the reporter's ultimate allegiance is not to you, but to that story. Chip says, when we asked, is it ever appropriate to talk off the record? Chip says, yes, in some cases, but don't quote me on that. Clever and sarcastic Chip. So some people do believe that it's okay sometimes. I don't ever do it. Craig goes on to say that as a general rule, the answer is no, don't talk off the record. He says only under extreme circumstances with a very reliable source or reporter. And Steve says there's really no such thing as off the record, is there? He says you can say that it's on background, but it's the decision of the reporter to honor that, and he says that's his 2 cents. When I was in journalism school, I remember our professors teaching us in our ethics class never to ask anyone to talk off the record because it created an ethical and a moral dilemma. In other words, source number one could give me information off the record, but even if I confirmed it with source number two, I should not use that information because I gave my word to source number one. So in my definition, off the record means that if a second source gives me that information later, I can't use it because source number one will think that I broke their trust. Then there's the question of what is on background. Many people will go on background, meaning as a source, you will give them information, but the reporter will pledge not to quote you. But what ends up happening is they say something like a high-ranking official in company XYZ who asked not to be quoted told us, and then give the information. Everybody who knows you will know the quote came from you. So it's pretty hard to hide that. Ultimately, it just creates a lot of problems. I've seen some people intentionally go off the record so the reporter will ask other sources very hard questions. When there's a dispute, especially between two parties, source number one will set up source number two to face some really ugly questioning as part of a vendetta or to manipulate the outcome of the story. Overall, my rule is this. There are some great quotes that you can give a reporter on the record that they can use in their story. And there are almost no, I will never say never, but there are almost no circumstances where you need to go to the extent of saying this is off the record. It just causes too many ethical and moral problems. So that's my 2 cents. I hope this has been helpful to you. We will be back next week with another episode of the Broadcast. Hope to have you weigh in on the discussion next week. For the Broadcast, I'm Jarrett Breaux.